This is our homily for Sunday, October 8th, the 27th Sunday of Ordinary Time. As a traffic light turned yellow, the man slowed down and stopped. The tailgating woman behind him was furious and honked her horn, screaming in frustration as she missed her chance to get through the intersection. As she was still in mid-rant, she heard a tap on her window and looked up into the face of a very serious police officer. The officer ordered her to exit her car with her hands up. He took her to the police station where she was searched, fingerprinted, photographed, and placed in a cell. After a couple hours, a policeman approached the cell and opened the door. She was escorted back to the booking desk where the arresting officer was waiting with her personal effects. He said, "I'm very sorry for this mistake. You see, I pulled up behind your car while you were blowing your horn, giving the guy in front of you the finger, and cursing at him. Then I noticed the 'What would Jesus do' bumper sticker, the 'Choose Life' license plate, the 'Follow Me to Sunday School' bumper sticker, and the chrome-plated Christian fish emblem on the trunk of the car. So naturally, I assumed you had stolen the car." Are we truly living the commitment we have made to live as Jesus did? Our first reading in the Gospel used the image of a vineyard with a landlord and tenants. This situation would have been very common in the time of Jesus. Most of the land was owned by absentee landlords, and there was a lot of unrest around the system, which the tenants saw as unfair. There was even a movement called, quote, "land for the farmers," end quote. This parable continues the theme of last week's parable about the two sons. If you remember, Jesus accused the scribes and Pharisees of saying they were doing the will of the Father, but not actually doing it. With this parable, Jesus ups the ante. He points out that their violence against God's prophets and messengers, who were calling them to actually do what they were saying. This parable has been used by Christians as an excuse for prejudice and harsh treatment of the Jews. Any use of this parable to support harsh treatment or violence is a travesty. Look at the attitude of the religious leaders and then the attitude of Jesus. To Jesus' question, "What will the landowner do to the tenants who had murdered his son?" the religious leaders responded by continuing the violence. And I quote, "He will put those wretched men to a wretched death and lease his vineyard to other tenants who will give him the produce at proper time," end quote. Notice the violence and even the word wretched. But how does Jesus react? I quote, "The kingdom of God will be taken away and given to people who will produce fruits," end quote. Notice, there's no violence, just the very practical, calm, and predictable decision that a change would have to be made. While I was reflecting on what I wanted to say in this homily, two other things popped into my conscience. The gospel reading on Tuesday morning had Jesus wanting to stay in a Samaritan town, but the Samaritans didn't want him there because he was a Jew. The reaction of James and John, two of the most important disciples, was to ask this question, "Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them?" An extremely violent reaction. But we are told Jesus rebuked them. It's another example where those who should understand Jesus' way of nonviolence didn't get it. Jesus just walked on to another town. Are we as human beings so hardwired for violence? Then the second thing that hit me is the constant violence around us, not only in mass shootings. In just one day in August, there was a mass shooting at a Boston parade, at an Oklahoma high school, and a Florida Dollar General store. A parade, a school, and a store. But also children whose lives are senselessly cut short. There are about 20 who have died already this year just in Milwaukee, with over 100 children shot. How can I get my head around all this? Most Americans are Christians, but we owe 42% of civilian firearms worldwide. Our televisions and computer games flood our children with violent actions and images. What is happening? How do our gospel values fit into all of this? It is a challenge for us to hear the call of Jesus for nonviolence and to follow it. Love thy enemy, turn the other cheek, forgive and you will be forgiven. When someone harms you, must be the first to reach out for reconciliation. Do we really believe these things? Are we trying to grow in being nonviolent, forgiving, compassionate people? It is easy to feel overwhelmed and decide there is nothing we can do. And that is correct if we only think of removing all the violence in the world. But we are not expected to remove all violence. We are expected to start with ourselves and do what we can. For example, root out violence a little at a time in ourselves. For example, learning to be calm in traffic. Relationships with others, learn to control anger. With children, be conscious of what we give them. Guns, violent video games, what we allow them to watch on TV. And perhaps you can think of other examples that are relevant in your life. So the reflection I invite us to this week: where do anger and violence manifest themselves in my life? What can I do to slowly root it out? What is one practical thing? And parents or guardians, what am I doing to help my child absorb Jesus' values rather than what is peddled on TV and the computer? How can I do better? There are things we can do in our daily lives to remove anger and violence in ourselves and those around us, especially our children. Let us do our best to make sure that the way we act matches the "What would Jesus do?" bumper sticker on the back of our car. God bless.